Okay, let's start. Welcome. If the others are in the retirement, this is not very good. They retire too early. Okay. So very good. Papers are very good. You got an A++ there. And let me just look some of the things which we looked at. So I made some corrections, and you can look at this. So I think the main issue is, what this. It is the Dialectics of Enlightenment by Adorno and Horkheimer, who are the two great people in the critical theory. So in Frankfurt and then at Columbia University. And the question is, how, after this great enlightenment, the bourgeois enlightenment, the Marxist enlightenment, the Freudian enlightenment, how it could happen that fascism could happen. Here is fascism. There it is, right? Not here. But that is only one of them. So there is Mussolini, there's Franco, there's Salazar, there is the fascist in Croatia, and so on. So all of Europe. And now again, right? It's not just 50 years ago, 70 years ago. It's now again, all European countries move to the right. So we have fascist parties in all, and in Brussels too, there. So because of the emigration of the people coming in. So that's a very, very important question. So the question is, how can it happen after 200, 300 years? You can even go back to the 18th century, which would be the scientific revolution and the technology which comes from all of this. So, yes.
I thought when people say enlightenment, then it's this bourgeois enlightenment. But you
right.
say that there is Marxist.
You could take the natural science revolution too of the 18th century, because it changed. The Enlighteners took categories. Do we have a question? Just ask whenever you want to drop in there. Okay.
Darwin.
Yeah. Well. I mean, no. I mean the natural scientists, Bacon and so on. They developed a new logic, a new limitations to what men can know, and so on. So it influenced it. But the real bourgeois enlightenment is the 18th century. That's Voltaire and Rousseau. So they are 18th century people before that. But they were influenced by this. So the question is, how after this whole enlightenment, this regression into barbarism, which is the opposite of enlightenment, could happen. And I mean continuing, because it's the Second World War, it's fascism, the Second World War, and then the Cold War, and then the war against terror. So how all of this, that was in that book that was written in 1943 or 44. So that means all what happened afterwards, fascism didn't finish, didn't end. That is the issue. That's why we have Trump now. But there is Trump everywhere. In England, there's a Trump. In Germany, there's a Trump. There are Trumps everywhere. So how could that happen after this enlightenment? And not only the bourgeois enlightenment of Rousseau and Voltaire, but also the enlightenment of Marx and also the enlightenment of Freud. How this could happen. Now, we have to see what I can hold. It's okay. But so we have to see something else. And that is that the enlighteners, when they came, they were critical of religion because religion did not make people moral. Why did it not make them moral? It was particularly Christianity which they had in mind. It does not make them moral because it teaches, for instance, Christ is my Savior. That means your sins are forgiven. And people don't have to do anything themselves. They get it as a present, as a gift, as grace. That's called grace. So God gives them that forgiveness, and so people say, Christ is my Savior, and then they kill 100 people last week with one of these strikes of these automatic airplanes. They just killed the finance minister of ISIS, and so on. So every week, and so on, they murder somebody, and they say, Christ is my Savior, and so on. They have the slums here, 40 million people in those slums, and their conscience says nothing. So it is that what the enlightener then called Opium Religion. Opium religion makes you feel good, but it dulls your conscience. So when you see bad things, it does not work. It says, so what? That's how it is, and so on. So positivism, right? That is the attitude. So now, therefore, the enlightener said, these religions, these Abrahamic religions, who rest on the authority of Yahweh, or the authority of Allah, or the authority of Moses, or the authority of Muhammad, these are authoritarian religions. These produce authoritarian personalities. Here you get the whole thing from Adorno and Fromm and so on, the authoritarian personality. And they develop another personality, the revolutionary or democratic personality. What's the difference? The difference is that the enlightened person does not depend on authority, which is called heteronomy. It's Greek. Heteros means the other. Nomos means the law. So the law comes from another. Yahweh spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, 10 commandments. You should not kill. You should not commit adultery, and so on and so on. Or Jesus teaches all that what he hears from the Father. The Father is Yahweh. So Yahweh tells him what to say. And he says, I don't say anything else than what I get from the Father. So there is this authority. People who do not rest their actions on their own thinking, but on what the authority tells them. So the Enlightenment now emphasizes not the authoritarian, but the democratic personality. That means enlightenment means to make use of your own understanding, of your own thinking. That means autonomous reason. So remember, the fundamental thing of our critical theory is this division of religion and enlightenment. Religion rests on authority, enlightenment rests on thinking. That you think yourself. Now, one reason why the enlightenment may not work is that it is very hard to think yourself. So Kant, the great enlightener, thought that people are guilty because they remain stupid. They don't want to think. They are too lazy to think. And so nevertheless, the ironical thing which happened now is the enlightener said, you religious people don't make people moral. They remain as immoral as they were before, if they're in your religion or not. And so you have, 4 million Western Europeans marching with Hitler, all baptized, Protestant and Catholics, killing 27 million people, women and children and communists and whatever, and 6 million Jews on the top of it. We saw that movie the last time, which was a little part of it, right? So, and then today we see another one there. So, but the irony is now, did the enlighteners make people more moral? That was the purpose now. And there we have the problem that the enlighteners are autonomous. Autos means self, nomos means law. That means they give the laws themselves. But do they obey their own laws better than the others obeyed the laws of God?
How you call this? Auto what?
That is heteronomy. Heteronomy, that would be, religious people are called heteronomous because they obey not themselves, their own reason, but they obey God's reason, God's commandments, God's revelation. Yes. Obey means to what is there's another word for it? Follow it, yeah. So to follow another person's law, namely the God's law. And now the enlighteners follow their own law, but they are not following it neither. So an example, for instance, the Constitution here. According to the Constitution, the Congress must declare war. The last time the Congress did that was in 1941 or 2 or 140 against Japan. So where the president went to Congress and said, the Empire of Japan has attacked us, I ask the Congress of the United States to declare war. That was constitutional. Since that time, there were 25 wars, and none of them has been declared that way. The Vietnam War, the Afghan War, the Iraq War, and so on, none of them was declared by Congress. They were always initiated by the executive, not by the legislative body, as the Constitution says. So that means they made a law. That's an Enlightenment document. The Constitution is Enlightenment. It's not a religious document. No name of God is in there, nothing. And so it is our making, but we do not even follow it. Now, the President has recommended a judge, but the Congress does not listen to the judge, does not bring them for a hearing, and so on. So that means the Congress simply does not obey the Constitution. The President does, the other one does not. So that the issue with that, what we will see next time, the Nuremberg trial. The Nuremberg trial was the peak of a new development of international law. It did not come from a revelation, not a supernatural revelation, not Yahweh, not Allah or whatever. It was made by human beings. It was a product of human reason. So it was done in Tokyo too. So in both cases, the first time governments were found criminal and were hanged and so on. So, but that is now the basis of the War Criminal Tribunal in Den Haag. But we have not signed up to it. That we put Milosevic, the Serb, on it, but we do not, Bush does not go there, who started 2 wars, which is against international law, and we have not signed on because we say we may do war crimes and we don't want to be pulled to the court. So that means these laws have been developed for other people, but not for us ourselves. Now, the UN, of course, if Bush would go out, the UN will catch him. Rumsfeld went to Paris recently, and he was right away caught. The court started operating. He ran to Germany and came back and so on. Nobody can leave the country. But we ourselves, we are not putting them on trial here. That means we do not even obey our own human reason. We make it for other people, excuse ourselves, and so on and so on. So we have this horrible dilemma that on one side we have to admit that religion does not make people moral. But some of them, maybe. But as far as the masses are concerned, the child abuse cases of clergy. These clergy, they celebrate the Mass every day, and then they abuse these children and violate the trust of the children and of the parents and so on. After a whole life of doing holy things, they do this immoral stuff. And so this, of course, it happens on the secular side as well. So, but the issue is now, religious people don't make people moral. The enlighteners who attacked religion because they don't make people moral, they cannot do it neither. And so that is a horrible dilemma now, because the two forces which we have is either religion or it is the Enlightenment. If neither of them works, who will make people moral? And the sad answer of that is necessity. That means if you don't think and then act accordingly, then necessity sets in, and that means that the marriage goes to pieces, the children are not educated, they don't get good jobs, and so on. One thing after the other, which follows from being immoral. The immorality and functionality are somehow going together. So, for instance, when you torture somebody, waterboarding, or torture in general, that is, of course, immoral. But what people justify it, religious people, like the Great Inquisition, or secular people, like Hitler, and like Bush, and so on, then they do that in order to get information. Now, that is a good goal. But in terms of morality, the good goal does not sanctify the bad means. But these bad means are not only bad morally, they're also bad technically, because you don't get the right information. Because when you do that, waterboarding, you take people close to death. And in order to stop that, they will say whatever you want them to say, and so you get the wrong information. So what is immoral is also not economically or politically wise in the long run.
You know,
But people always think that way, yes.
you know that happened in front of Prophet Muhammad, and he said very interesting. He was praying, and when you pray, you cannot cut the prayer. Anyway, two of his companions caught one important person from enemies, and they asked him about they need some information about the army coming. They didn't want to give them information, so they started beating them. So they spoke out, and after Prophet Muhammad prayed, said to them, "You ask them. This is the truth. You beat them. They lied. You left them." So he means that beating them would bring lie, wouldn't bring the truth from them.
Right. Yeah, of course. So it's a very old type of thing, yeah. Right, so then, I mean, if the Enlightenment doesn't work and religion doesn't work, then people have to learn the hard way. That is what it means, that necessity will take over. So, and Hitler had to learn the hard way, and Bush will have to learn the hard way, the humiliation which his brother just went through, and so on. So it doesn't go well in the end. So, but that is, of course, you know, a sad answer to the whole thing, and I wish we had another one. But this is enough for the moment. So that's a very good paper, and so I just took out the main issue, but Vernunft, it's all in German. He wrote his paper in German here, so that is wonderful. Okay, so the whole book is about myth and enlightenment, and maybe the most important thing in that book is, which you haven't mentioned here, is this prohibition against making images of the absolute. So Islam is very strict about this. So it is in the Decalogue, it is the second commandment not to make images of the absolute, and then there is a third one, not to name the absolute, or at least not to abuse the name of the absolute. And the Frankfurt School people radicalized that, and not to name the absolute at all. So you cannot use any names of God, no images for God, because that always leads to idolatry. And idolatry is the worst sin for all these three Abrahamic religions.
Yahweh is the name of God? Yahweh or...
Yahweh is the name of God.
So is that...
But there are several names in the... yeah. Adonai means Lord, and there are different names, 3 or 4 different names.
So they wouldn't have problem with such thing?
Well, they contradicted their own... Well, as far as the names are concerned, the third commandment does not say not to name God. It says not to abuse the name of God. But the Frankfurt School says that every finite name for the infinite is an abuse. No finite name can reach the infinite, no matter what it is. It will always be a finite name with which you name the infinite, and that you know is but. So nevertheless, and what the Frankfurt School people did, they take that very seriously, the second and the third commandment, and then connect it with Kant, with Immanuel Kant, with the Enlightener. So a bridge between religion and enlightenment, which is very important, because Kant is a critique of human reason, what human reason can do. And he said human reason, human understanding cannot transcend the boundaries or the limits of the senses, the eyes, the ears, and so on. So therefore, all proofs of God, the cosmological proof, teleological proof, and the ontological proof, they have all been cancelled by Kant on this epistemology that is called. So enlightenment starts with epistemology. It starts with doubt. And that goes, the attack against the authoritarian personality. Do you really know that God exists? How do you know that God exists? And if he exists, how do you know that he can speak? And if he speaks, how do you know that he did speak to Moses, that he did speak to Jesus, that he did speak to Mohammed? So, and then when he spoke to him, how do you know that what he spoke to Mohammed or Moses, that this is really in these writings? So are these writings really coming from there? So the 5 books of Moses have not been written by Moses. There you have the attack of the Enlightenment, right? So when I studied theology 70 years ago, they still said that were the 5 books of Moses. but it was already a question because the last book of Moses is about the death of Moses. Nobody can write about his own death, so they should have had problems. So, but in the meantime, they have explored it, and they have seen that these books were created in the year, from the year 1000, that is Solomon and David, to the year 500 something, when the Jews, the two tribes in the north, were taken to Babylon. So between that time, it took 500 years to write the Hebrew Bible, or what they call the Old Testament. So, and so between the first writing by a priest, the priestly code, and Joshua or Moses was about 200 years. So for 200 years these stories were told orally, and then a priest started to write, and several people wrote it. And you can see that the name of God is different. So some texts they use one name like Yahweh or Elohim or whatever. And so according to that, you have 3 different names of God. You have 3 different authors. So that is now this skepticism. To be modern means to be skeptical. To be modern means to doubt everything. And out of this doubt comes that the 5 books of Moses are suddenly not written by Moses. Not only after his death he didn't write anything. Before his death he didn't write anything either. So who has written them? So then they look at this, and they find that priest, and then, you know, there was redactions of the book. It was rewritten again and again and again until it finally took that form. 200 years after Christianity appeared, the rabbis took some of the books out. They said they are not inspired. The modern man asked, how do you know if a book is inspired? How do you not know if a book is inspired? So here you have the whole discourse between religious people and modern people. And but Fromm, who was very scholarly in terms of Judaism and so on, he wrote about the Sabbath and about the law and so on. That is where he slowly, where they explored, you know, what is certain, what can we really believe and what not. And they refused to believe simply because somebody said it. Jesus said it, and they have to believe it, you know. So. And then they didn't believe in miracles anymore. They are all 3 Abrahamic religions, all the other religions, they all have miracles. Then they didn't believe angels anymore. You know, there is angel Gabriel, you know, is between Allah and Muhammad. So there was no angel neither. And an angel, the same angel, then proclaimed the birth of Jesus, and there is no angel neither, and so on. The virgin birth, which both religions believe in, there's the angel involved. The angel ghost is not there anymore. So yeah, you see how deep the abyss is, right? It's not our real theme here, but this book, which you did here, shows, you know, how important that issue of religion and enlightenment is. Okay, very good. So the last thing which I said now was the enlighteners, Horkheimer and Adorno, take from Moses, or whoever wrote it, take from Moses this second and third commandment against idolatry and connect it with Kant's epistemology. That means the science, how we know, how far can we really know. And the issue is we cannot know about things which are above our senses. God, angel, all this is above our senses. So therefore we cannot know anything about it. And so then they come up with a natural religion, a religion which does not rest on a relation, on an authority, but a religion which comes out of human reason. So when they find out that in so many religions, we mentioned that there is a trinity, for instance, in Taoism and in the Egyptian religion, and Zoroastrianism and in Christianity and in Neoplatonism and so on, then they say the only explanation which we have is that human reason is threefold. That means human reason operates in terms of Trinity, and this reason is projected in those religions. That is how all these religions became then Trinitarian. Okay, so, but...
or we could say that, yes, there are a couple of religions that had 3 gods, but there are others that had like 2 or more than 3. So it's not only three in all cases. There are two.
Yeah.
There are
Well,
five.
what they would say is, that sometimes the gods differentiate because they're not three gods. So it's one divinity which lives in three systems, so to speak, right? So it's always one. So it's three in one. It's not just three beside each other.
That's what Catholicism says.
Well, that's what the Persian religion, for instance, which is at the base of all of this, what it says, there are Mazda and there's Maitras and Ahriman. So for a long time I didn't know that Maitras, was in the middle of the two and was the mediating one. One is the principle, the other one mediates, the other one is the goal of the whole thing. See, it's not only that they are three together, but they constitute one reality and one notion, but one is the beginning, the other one is the procedure, and the other one is the goal of the whole process. So the God goes out of himself and returns to himself. It's the same God who goes out of himself and goes through these stages and returns to himself. That is what you found in Taoism and in Hinduism, Brahm and Shiva and Krishna and Shiva and so on. It's the same thing. Only there the God does not return to himself fully, but gets stuck in nature.
Has God at all? Taoism has any God?
It starts too. Yeah, it starts there already with this threefold thing. So that Kant starts with it, and Hegel then goes through the whole thing and has even more empirical thing. But that's not our concern. But our concern is that the critical theory, that's what we are concerned with, is of course on the side of enlightenment, but they are also willing. So let me put it back again. With the antagonism between the religious and the secular, the religious people split, and as you see with ISIS and the others, and the secular people split too between each other. And some of these secular people are still open for religion. Other secular people don't want to have anything to do with religion whatsoever. Somewhere in the middle, they say they don't want to do anything, but for the people it's good. For the masses it's good, because the masses cannot think, and therefore masses have to have an authority. But the real enlightenment, that's the American ruling class. The American ruling class doesn't believe a thing, but they think it's good for the people. So Jefferson said already, the Americans have to read the Bible. The more they read the Bible, the better we can govern them. So that the bourgeoisie can govern those 250 million workers, it's good that they do the Bible, and they do a lot of the Bible. So that means it's a horrible abuse. A religious person would never instrumentalize religion and say the religion is good for the stupid ones and so on because they cannot think. Even fascism had the same thing. With Hitler had army chaplains. He had army chaplains, like the American army. And when they would be asked, why do you have army chaplains? He would say, well, there are some, uneducated, stupid people who cannot die without a God. They need a God. So, well, if they die better, it's okay, then we give them army chaplains. So the army chaplains prepared them for dying. The same thing they did in Vietnam, and so on. So now we have to see now, no religious person would do this. Jefferson was not a religious person. Did they use religious language? Yes, they were Anglicans. But they used the same Anglicanism for the same purpose. So had done the king or the bourgeoisie in London. So that is a very important thing. Now, the critical theorists are bourgeois. They belong to that class, you see. But they have become unhappy with the class of their parents. They have looked through the swindle of it. They discovered that their rich parents got their wealth from the workers in their factories. And they were disgusted about this immorality. And then Horkheimer was the CEO in his father's factory, where they changed rags, which they collected in the city of Frankfurt, and then, or Stuttgart, and then they transformed them into clothing, and they sold them for much more, and so on. But these people had to work in the horrible heat, naked. They worked naked for 18 hours and whatever, and the surplus value was the basis on which Horkheimer had a nice life and could travel and could go and learn languages and so on. So this immorality was what then transformed them. And it happens, not only in this case, it happens very often in Europe. Jews, which you saw in this camp, they're Jews which are not washed and bathed very well. They came from the East, then They went into the rag business, they collected rags and made some money and got richer and richer. And then the next generation comes and says, how the hell did you get rich? And the question is, these workers, that's how you got rich. They had to bleed for you and had to remain stupid for you and so on. And then comes the bad conscience. That is real enlightenment. It's not to dull the conscience, but it's to awaken the conscience. So nobody could live in Kalamazoo if the conscience had not been dulled. They would not have 100,000 people in the slums there for 120, 30 years already. Nobody who has a conscience could possibly live there. And so I took the class over to the slums last week, to the Northern Presbyterian Church, with the young minister and so on. They saw the whole thing. Nobody's employed. Most of them are mentally ill and so on. And now he even has to sell the church next month because he cannot pay for it. And his salary is, he has 2 children and so on. So he has a conscience. And the people who give him the money have a conscience. But Kalamazoo has no conscience. Otherwise that would not exist.
What he does for people? Or?
Well, he has this community there, and he came late because he had to go with a parishioner who fell into a coma. He had to go to the hospital, so we had to stand in the cold out there and wait for him and so on. So he cares for people. He visits them in the hospital. He has the services for them. He preaches for them. He teaches them and so on for almost nothing. So you do have people with conscience in America, but the overall thing is without conscience. It is an opiate religion, what the bourgeois enlighteners call opiate religion. It's not Marx who taught it that way. He learned it from Hegel, and Hegel learned it from Kant, the greatest of all enlighteners. So, opium religion, which makes you feel good and dulls your conscience, while the enlightener wants to awaken the conscience. And the enlightener then connect with Moses, or they also connect with Jesus, because Jesus introduced into the Jewish religion a moral revolution, like Socrates did in Athens. Jesus did that in Jerusalem. So then it's the Sermon on the Mount. You should not murder. You should not even say you communist to somebody. You shouldn't say you terrorist. You have already killed them when you do that. So you should not commit adultery. Even if you look at somebody already and desire him, you have already broken your marriage. Not only outside, but in your heart already. And you should not take any oath. You should say yes, yes, no, no. Because more than that is from Satan and so on. So Jesus made a tremendous moral revolution. The enlighteners take that up. They take Jesus seriously. So, but when Marx criticizes the Christians in London and in Washington and Berlin and Brussels and so on, he does that not because he is against Christianity, but because those Christians do not follow Jesus. That means Jesus died against all those who use his name nowadays and so on. Those people who made the Crusades and all these hellish things today, the alliance with fascism. He was a Catholic. Goebbels was a Catholic. Himmler, with the concentration, he was a Catholic. They were all Catholics or Protestants and so on. So the Marxist critique, the enlightener, does not critique Jesus, except Nietzsche did, but and Freud did not. But the discrepancy that these Christians have nothing to do with the moral revolution which Jesus made.
So here comes a question for me. So there is antagonism between religion and enlightenment. They can't live together somehow.
First thesis, right? That is the first thesis. Yeah.
First thesis.
Right.
Then there is the other enlightenment, the enlightenment of Marcus, and so how this also it has also big part in modern religion. So how come that Frankfurt School could build a kind of bridge between religion and this type of on social the social?
Okay, so the question is, how did enlightenment develop at all? Because you don't have any enlightenment in Buddhism, you don't have any enlightenment in Judaism, you don't have any enlightenment in Islam, and so on. So where the hell does it come from? It comes from Christianity. So Christianity is fully responsible for it. How did it happen? The Christian community at a certain point split in those naive believers who say their prayers and believe what is in the Bible as it is written and don't ask all these questions and have no doubts, and the doubts are all repressed and so on. But others suddenly began to learn. That means they use the categories of Aristotle, which they got through 1,000 years of Middle Ages, like it did too, through Averroes, but it was broken off by the Sufis and the lawyers at a certain point. So these categories now, but they didn't apply them anymore to theological questions, but they applied it to nature, and they applied it to man and human history and so on. That means instead of the human spirit going up into this heaven, they went down to nature and to history. So you have Copernicus, the sun system, you have Galileo, the sun system, you have Darwin, then the biology thing, the evolution and so on, and then you have Freud, the internal structures of the psyche and so on. So one step of enlightenment after the other. But it started at the beginning, and so then the church, the community, said you cannot say this. They showed Galileo, the torture instruments and so on. They didn't want to bury Darwin. He was buried long after his death in Westminster Abbey and so on. So, and then later on they didn't even want to be buried. So partially they left, partially they were pushed out. And from the last century on, they don't even want to be buried by anybody anymore. They don't want to have anything to do with religion anymore. So then you have the atheists and so on, and the bourgeois atheists, and we have 3 or 4 now, which are very famous and have a lot of following and so on. So and other people, you see it, they don't want their children baptized anymore. They don't want to get married with the priest anymore. They go to justice of the peace and so on. So this is this whole movement of secularization, which continues and continues, is not stopped anywhere. Okay, so that is a mass type of movement. It's not this guy or that guy or whatever.
So these leaders of Frankfurt School were at that time where they still want to have tried at least to understand religion in a better way.
Okay, so the secular people are split between those who don't want to have anything to do with it and others who are still open to it. So these Frankfurt School Jews were assimilated Jews. That means they were assimilated by the bourgeois enlightenment. They were still believers. The Jewish community split now, like Christianity did, and you had the Orthodox guy who just had the Torah, and then you had conservative rabbis who were a little bit open since the French Revolution, only since then, and then you have Reformed ones who are even more open. So the question what we are looking for in Islam is now people who are like ISIS, they are this traditional stuff, and then others who are pro-West and want to talk with Western science and Western politics and want to have a separation of church and state and want to have privatization of religion and so on. So when they talk here about we want to talk with moderate Muslims would be assimilated Muslims. That means they would be Muslims who read the Torah, the Holy Quran, and who say their prayers, but they also want to participate in enlightenment. They want to drive a car, and men and women, and they want to have a heart operation when they need one, and they want to fly in the airplane and so on. And they don't want to become schizophrenic by saying this modernity is hellish, it's evil, and then they go to the hospital and have a heart operation, and then they drive a car anyway, and so on and so on.
Even Orthodox.
And use electricity.
Even Orthodox Jews, everybody drive cars and fly and everything.
Well, there are some who don't,
Oh, really?
particularly not on the Sabbath, right? So, and others do it. Where we went, I take the students to all these different groups so that they see how each group is split in itself. So the main antagonism splits the religious people, but splits also the modern people, and the enlighteners of the Frankfurt School are first of all assimilated Jews already, so they are already open for modernity, but they want to retain some of their heritage. Some of their grandfathers were rabbis or whatever. So they want to retain some. What they don't retain is the second and the third commandment.
That's it.
Because that connects them with Kant. And now Kant and Hegel were also still believers. That means they were Lutherans. They were Reformed people, Lutheran. So it is not so that Kant, the greatest, so Voltaire and Rousseau, they were Catholics, So they have still religious roots, but then they slowly become rationalists. And the rationalist can become a naturalist. A naturalist is somebody who rejects all revelation. The revelation by Allah, the revelation by Yahweh, the revelation by Ahura Mazda, and so on. While the rationalist as such may be a man, the pure rationalist, like Kant, for instance, he would say, well, there is the possibility and the necessity that such a revelation can really exist. If God wants to lead people from animality, from the chimpanzees, to the realm of freedom, that they become really human, he may use a revelation. So that means the pure rationalist can say that, the naturalist would not say this. So that you see that modern people are also split in themselves and are struggling against each other. And so the socialists went further than the bourgeoisie in their denial of an authority, of a heavenly authority, and so on, or any kind of a revealing God.
There is the rationalist and naturalist.
Yeah,
Rationalist
right,
still
right,
combine
yeah. Right. So we are only concerned now with those people there of the Frankfurt School who belong to the Enlightenment. They unite in their theory the bourgeois Enlightenment, the Marxist Enlightenment, and the Freudian Enlightenment. You have neither of them in Saudi Arabia. I don't know how much the British carried in there. I'm not familiar enough how much of that Enlightenment they introduced. Yeah.
We are discussing about what you just said about enlightenment. Some people, you said they are praying and they read Holy Quran and they want to share to write explain or what's the relationship between
Well,
the religion and between being modern.
So what I said is the religious people are split in themselves. There are those who only read the Holy Quran and say their prayers, and they don't want to hear anything from the West, anything of these modern ideas or whatever. But then there are others who still believers, still pray, and at the same time are open and say, let's see what the West, what the science and technology and all this, what they have to offer. And if we can bring that together with our faith, we will not give up our faith, but we want to be open for modernity. I mean, that's practically what you do by just being in the West and learning, what they have to offer. Because these sciences, even if they are very positivistic, they are the result of the Enlightenment, You may say it is an Enlightenment which has turned against itself, but it is still Enlightenment. So when whatever class you go into it, you get in contact with that Western Enlightenment. And I'm quite sure that there are people in ISIS who would say that this is not a good thing. Not Saddam Hussein really, he was open too, but Bin Laden, for instance. Bin Laden went to Boston, and there he saw what happens to Islamic students. And he saw that the girls changed their clothing, or the men did, and he saw, what they learned. And they saw that they learned more and more instrumental rationality. No matter in what you are, if you go into aviation, into airplane business, or if you go into sociology and so on, all our sciences are instrumental rationality. But the Holy Quran is based subjectively on communicative, mimetic rationality. So by simply being trained for 4 years in the West with instrumental rationality, the West doesn't say anything against the community of rationality, but because you learn all the time one side, this instrumental rationality, you are now developing, and your communicative rationality is not developed at the same time, to the same extent. It's possible that you come to Egypt or to Saudi Arabia and the airport and so on, and without you having noticed it, you have become now more instrumentally thinking, and it's harder and harder to think in terms of the Prophet, in terms of the Holy Quran and so on. So that is what he was afraid of. It was not a simple question of does Allah exist or did he write this or whatever, but it is that the subjective organ, the eye on the heart is not trained anymore, is not really open to even discuss those questions. That is the great danger.
Where these words came from, mimetic or communicative rationality?
Well, the Enlightenment and the idealism, they started with the language and memory, and then with work and tool, and with sexuality and eroticism, and struggle for recognition and social community. And the instrumental rationality comes from the human potential of work and tool. That means self-preservation, that's a fundamental thing. We have to preserve ourselves within nature, so we have to fight with nature. We have to have metabolism, make our food, clothing, housing, and so on. That's instrumental rationality. And communicative rationality, or mimetic rationality, is what the baby and the mother have with each other, or what lovers have with each other. Hopefully, it's not instrumental, but it's communicative still. Let's see, a doctor whom I know, a woman comes in and she has the second baby and she's still not married. So the doctor tells to her, why do you have the second baby? Why don't you have birth control? And so on. Birth control is instrumental thinking. The girl says, love must be spontaneous. We don't take birth control and so on. So that means the woman has another logic than the doctor has. The doctor's logic is instrumental rationality and action. Take that birth control. That's an instrument in order to prevent that you become pregnant again. But the girl says that it has been her and her lover, that there is another type of rationality, that is communicative rationality or mimetic rationality, which is very different. And in the West, instrumental rationality has been elevated. That's why you are here. You are here because of the instrumental rationality in all the disciplines. But what has been suffocated in the West in the last 400 years is communicative rationality. So therefore we sit in these beautiful airplanes, which are the product of instrumental rationality, and our marriages fall apart, our families fall apart, we have this abortion rate, we have this divorce rate, and so on. See, all the things of communicative rationality go down the drain, while at the same time the instrumental rationality, technology and so on, goes up. That is what Bin Laden and all these people are afraid of, that this is what will happen to you when you go to the West. And the West has a problem. There is a problem, see. When they send you from Saudi Arabia, they think that you have communicative rationality in the Holy Quran, so you don't need that from here, from the West. What you need from the West is the instrumental rationality. That's where the West made all the progress, where they made the progress. That's where they got the airplanes with which they bombed the sheiks in the North African desert and so on. That is how they did their colonialism, their imperialism, the British and so on. Not on the basis of their morality, but on the basis of their steamships and of their airplanes. That is how they subjugated all these countries. They made all the borders down there, the British and the French. It was not done by the people there. So they dominated on the basis of instrumental rationality, not on the basis of their morality or their religion or whatever. So that is the picture. Therefore, we have to understand also in Islam, we have to understand why some hold on so strictly to the traditions and so on, and why others want to take the risk and say, let's see what the West has to offer. Maybe some of their things are good, maybe some of their constitution, some of their technology, oil technology, and so on and so on. So that is the problem. But it may split, produce tensions in the Ummah, in the Islamic community.
Could we say that communicative rationality is a kind of positivist?
No, not necessarily.
The other one...
the communicative rationality is based in language,
no, I mean,
of course, in speaking.
Dialectical, and the other one, which is intellectual rationality, is more like positivist.
No, it is the instrumental rationality which becomes positivistic. So the instrumental rationality in science and so on becomes then positivistic and then destroys the Enlightenment. It ruins the Enlightenment, really. So what we have in the schools now is not the Enlightenment of Rousseau and Voltaire or Kant or Hegel or whatever. That means when the bourgeoisie was still revolutionary, they wanted to have, this dialectical thinking and all this. But after they gained power, they were not interested in that anymore. Positivism is an attitude for that what is the case. You want to have what is the case. So when the West Germans went to East Germany and stole all their chairs in the university and so on, then the students asked, okay, you tell us what society is like now, but how should the society be in the future? Then these West Germans said, hell, stop it, to just think what is the case, and they wanted to change it like they do here, the praying to that what is and not to that what ought to be. So a question if that is what is real is also rational, if that's rational is also real, that is enlightenment still, but we wouldn't ask those questions. That means that what is the case is also that what ought to be. And shut up. We already start with education of the little ones. When they sit in the classroom, they should learn mathematics. Then they look out and look at the birds, and they're distracted and so on. So they say, Johnny, wake up, don't dream, and so on. So we repress the communicative rationality in favor of an instrumental rationality which is bound to what is the case. It is as it is. You hear people say that when say, well, there is something bad, or whether they say it is as it is,
So the main difference between communicative rationality and instrumental rationality is that communicativism takes more in consideration the circumstances and other elements in decision thinking.
What the word says, if it's called imitative rationality or communicative rationality, what's the attitude toward nature? Our attitude toward nature is, what can we do with it? How much fruit do the trees, produce and so on. It is not a communication with nature, which would be a completely different thing, which Schelling and others still have, that communicative or imitative type of rationality, that you learn to look at a bird, not in the sense what you can do with the bird, or that you can shoot the bird, or that you can eat the bird, or whatever, but that you just imitate him in your mind, and you follow him, how he flies, it flies, and so on. So it's a completely different. So the Western attitude is an instrumental one all over the place, and not only toward nature, but then also toward man himself, so that people become commodities, I went to a capitalist here, and he talked about the peons. He has a corporation, and he talked about his peons, or his farmers, or whatever. That's why he talked about his workers, His workers are for him tools, the tools who produce his surplus value. And so that is, of course, that means with the revolution, it's not only that people have nothing to eat or whatever, a small house, it's also to be recognized. So that is another of these five things, right? It is the struggle for recognition. So that means many people feel that they are not recognized, that they are just peons, that they are just so-called farmers, or so they are just workhorses, and so on.
So in this case, communicative rationality could include religious thinking or metaphysics.
It does. It is the very subjective basis for religious thinking, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have to the extent to which you become a positivist, you will not be religious anymore. Because you have, that's what I said before, you study here in Boston or whatever, then you go home to Egypt or whatever, and you have become a different person, and you didn't even notice it.
While instrumental rationality focuses on the use or how the thing as an instrument for something else. That's it.
Yeah, for self-preservation, right? Instrumental rationality is how we keep alive in nature. It's necessary, right? We have to have instruments. We have to have tools. If we would suddenly say we are against technology, we'd all starve to death. So it is really necessary. But what has happened in the West is an imbalance. And the strange thing is, communicative rationality is based in language and memory. It's based in sexuality and eroticism. It is based in the struggle of recognition. It is based in community. And instrumental rationality is only based in one of our human potentials. But in spite of the fact that it's only one of these potentials, it has taken over everything else.
Is that here? This thing?
Yeah, it's there, yeah.
Where?
Here, there. There they are, all there. So it is under the subject, right?
What does the communicative rationality include behind what he said about the religion thinking?
Yeah. So what I say is, if, for instance, the instrumental rationality there in the human subject is developed, and the others are not developed, then the subjective basis for the Holy Quran has disappeared. people will not know why one needs the Holy Quran anymore. Because you don't need the Holy Quran in order to dig oil, or in order to fly an airplane, or to drive a car, or whatever. See, in the other words, we have this technology, but then divorce. That means the solidarity between the genders has broken down. If somebody suddenly, I don't like this guy anymore, or he doesn't make enough money anymore, or he's too angry, and so on, then you just break the solidarity and take another one, and so on. So solidarity between husband and wife, or between the parents and the children, and so on, this interrelationship between the mother and the baby, and so on, that is not instrumental rationality, except if the mother wants to sell her baby in order to get an income or whatever. So otherwise, see, we have to be careful now with dialectic thinking. We don't say that instrumental rationality or functional rationality, all your sciences are functional, that this is wrong or whatever. We need that in order to survive, so you cannot give it up. We cannot even reduce it, really. And, millions of people would starve to death. So, but the other side, which has been suffocated, has to be elevated. It has to be evolved. We try to do that with general studies, but the teachers hate general studies, the students hate general studies. Why? Because you cannot do anything with general studies. See, they all think instrumentally. Can you earn money with general studies? No. It makes you into a human being, but what's that,
So instrumental academia or society, what do you say about morality, which needs communicative?
Well, morality definitely has something to do with communicative rationality.
Exactly, not instrumental.
With speaking. So let's take one example. The Frankfurt School has an ethics, right, a morality. Morality is called communicative ethics, or it is called discourse ethics. So what does that look like? It's not Habermas who developed it, it's Appel, A-P-E-L, professor in Frankfurt, and I visited seminars with both of them where we discussed together, all three. So what does that mean? What kind of an ethics is that? First of all, it has nothing to do with religion anymore. These are enlightened people. So the basis is not theology. The basis is not Allah said we have to do this to have the 5 pillars and to care for the poor or go to Mecca or whatever. But it is human reason now. But what reason? Namely, communicative reason, communicative rationality, and so on. So what does that look like? How do you decide a thing like, let's say, abortion? You have a problem, abortion. Now, when you have the Jewish ethics and so on, well, sometimes you can have an abortion. When you have Catholic ethics in the extreme, no abortion whatsoever. If you have other Christians, they say, well, when the mother is in danger, you can have an abortion, and if it is incest, you can have an abortion. If it's rape, you can have an abortion, but otherwise you can't. So you have this culture war going on all day long. Trump has just discussed that yesterday, and so on. So how do they decide that? So what does the communicative discourse ethics, what do they say? They start out with an a priori, that means something which is not a matter of experience, but it is somehow rooted in our own rationality structure. So there is the a priori unlimited communication community. That means, which doesn't exist neither. It's all a priori. It's not a posteriori. It's not empirical. It's pre-empirical. So then we would say, if this community would be faced with this problem, what would they say? How would one make a decision? And one criterion would be that one has to include into that community, one has to include the victim. So who is the victim in abortion? The baby is the victim. Trump said today the mother is also the victim. First he said the mother has to be punished with an abortion. Then he came up with the idea that she's also a victim. She should not be punished, but the doctor has to be punished and the nurses have to be punished. That's his newest version. He makes up his ethics as he goes along, as does Obama. They all evolve suddenly, and evolve something in their head. If it's reasonable or not, that's another question. So nevertheless, So therefore, the question is, you have to get the consensus. That means the unlimited communication community is a consensus community. And you have to get the consensus, particularly of the victim. Will the little embryo consent to being aborted? Now, the little embryo cannot talk, so therefore you need an advocate for him who speaks in the name of the little embryo. And the advocate would say, okay, you put me into existence on January 1st, and then you abort me on March 1st. That is not a very rational type of behavior. Why the hell did you put me into existence at all? So if the little embryo then says this is irrational behavior, then one could not have an abortion. But if the little embryo would say, I will be born on the north side of Kalamazoo, that is hell. It is better not to be born at all than this. Then you could have an abortion. But we are so ashamed of these lumps, it would not even come up. So, for instance, the Romans never gave a definition of man because they would have get in trouble with all the slaves who were not considered to be men. And so there is no definition in the whole Roman law what man is, because they were so ashamed of the others who were obviously men, but they could not say it that they were men, because they could not have them as slaves. That means totally instrumentalize them. So, nevertheless. So this is the way how secular people, very enlightened people, who do not want to be authoritarian, they don't want to take it from a religious authority, not from God and not from Moses and not from the prophets and so on, but from their own thinking. So they say that we have these potentials, the human potential of language and memory. So therefore they start with language and memory and say, we have a discourse, we talk with each other, we talk about abortion, and so how can we come to a conclusion? What principles do we apply? They would say that we are to consent, we have to come to a consensus with each other, and in this consensus must be included the victim of the situation, which is here the embryo. Take another example. We have these shields against atomic bombs, we have this shield in the west coast and in the east coast. So if the Russians shoot a rocket to Baltimore, we have counter rockets which will hopefully catch them in the middle somewhere over the Atlantic, and when we have in the Pacific, North Korea or whatever should send one, then we can catch that. Now, but this shield means that probably 100 million Americans will have to die at the east coast or at the west coast in the first hours of the attack. Then these things will operate, and the rest of the bombs will be caught in the air, or will be exploded in the air, and will blow up over the Atlantic or the Pacific. Now, when we want to come to some decision, can we have these shields? We would have to ask the victims. Who are the victims? The 100 million at the east coast and the 100 million at the west coast. Either we have to ask them. If they say, yes, we are happy to sacrifice our lives so that the other 200 million can live, then it would be okay with that thing. But if they say, no, why should we die and the others live, and so on, and they are selfish creeps, and so on, then, of course, it could not be done. So that is how a modern man without theological basis, you see, if you cannot even maybe imagine that there is a man who has no theological basis, because you have Allah to pray to, and you have the revelation, so that you know in detail what the holy writings and scripts say. But there are people, for whom their doubt, their skepticism has removed all that, so they don't have it anymore. They may even think that it is dangerous to have authoritarian personalities. They may say, so look, Trump, who follows him? The evangelicals follow him, The evangelicals are all authoritarian personalities. And he is one. So therefore he has millions and millions of Catholics and evangelicals and authoritarian personality who like him because he is like they are. He talks like them. He looks like them, and so on. So that's what the case with Hitler there, whom we want to look at. Doesn't mean that Trump is a Hitler there, and so on. So you have to separate, people who have this philosophy and this philosophy itself, that is a different story, right?
So it's people who live in this instrumental rationality. Do they also join some or a lot of communicative rationality, or they separate them practically?
No, I mean, for instance, Luhmann, right? You're a sociologist, so Luhmann is a very important name. Luhmann, Luhmann, professor in Münster in Germany. Luhmann is like Parsons, a structural functionalist. So structural functionalism, is it too warm for you? Should I turn it off? Or
No, that's fine.
is the fire okay there?
Yeah.
Okay. So Luhmann is a student of Parsons, structural functionalism. It's totally sociology. And there are many of them, but that's just one very powerful sociology. That's the sociology all the politicians follow. So when they have a question like abortion or whatever, they will not say, what does Allah say? What does Moses say? What does Jesus say? But they say, what is the function if we, for instance, prevent abortion? What is this law? What is the law called there? The two names there which make up the abortion law.
Roe v. Wade.
Yeah. What is it? Roe
v. Wade.
Roe v. Wade. Yeah, Roe v. Wade. That is which allows abortion and so on. So there are these people with Trump. Some of them would like to cancel that law and forbid abortion and punish people for abortion and so on. So if the government people now, who are the bureaucracy and so on, if they have to decide, they will not say, is there something in the Bible you should not kill or whatever. It doesn't matter for them at all. They will think purely functional. What will be the consequence if we recriminalize, that's what it's called, when we recriminalize abortion? Well, the function will be, or the dysfunction will be, DYS, dysfunction, and eufunction would be a good consequence, dysfunction, bad one. So the dysfunction would be that we push all abortion, that's 1.5 million every year, we push them in the underground. That means the rich people will go to Tokyo and they will go to Sweden and they get their abortion. But all the others, and that's the majority, are poor. They will take the clothes hanger there and do it themselves, or they eat some pills or whatever, and not only destroy the embryo, sometimes they destroy themselves and not the embryo, and so on. So it will be like it was before, Roe versus Wade. It will be a horrible thing which will happen in the underground of people which is not visible and where the continued killing takes place. So that is functionalistic type of thinking, right? So it has nothing to do with God, nothing even with morality. It has nothing to do with morality. It has like either you can take an organism or take a machine. It's like a machine. Every part in this machine has a function. So everything what happens in the state or in the city or the society has a function. And you say, what is the function? What are the consequences? It's a consequential thinking. Out of this could be developed a consequential ethics, a consequence ethics. There's an intentionality ethics like Jesus or Socrates, and there are traditional forms of ethics, and there are theological forms of ethics, and so on. But what the opponents of the Frankfurt School, that were the structural functionalists. So Horkheim and Adorno never discussed with Parsons or whatever. Parsons was himself the son of a pastor still. Parsons studied in Germany. He was a biologist, and he applied then biology to society. He was dancing in Heidelberg in Germany. He was in the university, and a girl there asked him, why are you here? Why did you come to Germany? And he said, I want to study the sciences. And she said, don't you have any sciences in America? Why do you have to come here? And so on. And this question somehow stimulated in him the idea to create a sociology which would include anthropology, social psychology, and so on. And then he developed that system with culture being open still to the ultimate reality, which you still get from a theologian, namely from Paul Tillich, and then culture, and then society, and then personality, and then the organism, the environmental organism. And so that would include our Skinnerians on this campus. We're not real psychologists; they're rather biologists. And so that is for the organism down there. Then Freud for the personality, and then sociologists for society, anthropologists for culture, and the whole system was open toward nature below that. So that was the system, and each part of the system had a function. So culture had the pattern maintenance function, and society had the integrative function, and the personality had the goal attainment function, and the organism had the adaptive function. All 5 functions were taken from nature. That is what every organism down there does. It has to integrate, it has to adapt, it has to set goals, and so on and so on.
Or from nature?
Nature. Yeah, so I mean, all 5 functions are taken from biology. So the model then, how to look at our society, is a biological one. But it can also be a mechanical one, that you take a machine. So Parsons, and this is what guides our leadership in this country. So the bourgeois ruling class follows this Parsonian thinking. In our sociology department, we have hired a neo-functionalist some time ago, but nobody else is following Parsons. It's a middle-range type of a theory. But back to our thing. The critical theorists of the older generation did never talk with Parsons. That was so strange. It was the exact opposite. But then Habermas came together with Luhmann, and they even wrote a book together, where you then can see how this functional type of thinking and the critical thinking of the Frankfurt School, how that fits together. So Habermas was good friends with Parsons. He went with him to the 50th anniversary of his doctorate in Heidelberg. By the way, Heidelberg was never bombed because the American generals all had their girlfriends there. So during the war, when I took vacation from the war, I went to Heidelberg there. That was secure. Nobody would throw a bomb on Heidelberg. But Mannheim, just 20 miles earlier, was bombed day and night, and so on. So so nevertheless, they celebrate there. Then Parsons and Habermas went to Munich, and there in Munich, Parsons forgot his medicine and he died in Munich. And then Habermas took care of the widow and the whole funeral arrangements and so on. So the Frankfurt School people are somehow very skeptical about Habermas's friendship with Luhmann and so on, with Parsons rather. So, but then in the cooperation with Luhmann, what did he do? Habermas took that system, and he was criticized very much. But then he took culture and he took society and so on. He also took these functions, the pattern maintenance function or the integrated function. That means society, the family, for instance, connects the culture with the superego of the children, introduce it in the superego, socialization, internalization that's called, and thereby shape the personality and so on. So they took all of this. But then for Parsons, the whole thing was the life world. And then Habermas took out the life world of the system. And this life world consisted then of friendships, of love affairs, of the family, and of the neighborhood. So that was that where we are sitting here now. That is life world. In this life world, you still had communicative ethics. But then when you went from the life world to the economic system and the political system, then it turned over into functionalistic type of thinking and so on. That means there is still ethics at work in the life world. You should not lie to your neighbor, and you should help your neighbor, and so on and so on. But that is not valid anymore when you go into the economic system or the political system, like these campaigns now. So in these political systems, you have only instrumental rationality. You have only functional rationality. Only people, businessmen and politicians all think functionally, and they don't think ethically anymore. Or they use ethics like they use religion and so on. So that is so. And then the economy is run over the medium of money, and the political system is run over the medium of power. Only in the life world, there you have still communicative rationality, and it is run over ethical or religious values. But that's not the rest of the world. So now what these two systems do this instrumental rationale, according to Habermas, is they colonize their own life world. So they penetrate the life world. Like, for instance, here, advertisement all the time. Economy goes in, then propaganda comes into your living room and so on. So continually the economic subsystem of the human action system and the political one penetrate continually the life world and transform it and poison it. Let me just tell you a very strange story. My son, who is a lawyer in New York, is a homosexual. And he has, since years, there are coming doves fly to his window and make a nest there. And they make love with each other too in that nest. But they never have a family. And he asked himself, why does that happen? And then recently he found out that the city of New York poisons the food of the doves and therefore makes them sterile, like homosexuals are sterile in their interaction. So, and that, of course, you know, is that what happens to the homosexuals in a certain sense? That means that the culture is poisoned, and because of that poisoned atmosphere, that is why you have them all the time. So it was a strange experience for him to find out about this connection, because that certain organisms in a certain species suddenly do not reproduce. That is really not something usual. The species would die out if that could break through. So it is, therefore, every species will fight it if possible. So, but that this analogy, it's an analogy from nature, appeared right in front of his window. That was quite something. But so back to the life world now. What then Habermas adds to it are movements. So there are social movements which fight against the colonization of the life world by the economic and political system. And you see such a movement forming with Bernie. Bernie's movement is an attempt, is a counter movement to the colonization of the life world by the corporations, by the corporate elite, and so on. And to some extent that is for Trump as well. So only that he will not do much in order to stop the colonization, but he will probably, in the long run, he would promote it. But
he's not a part of it? He's not a part
He's part of it, yeah, right. And he said already we have to work together with the witch, of course, and he's himself a witch. So, but so Habermas, who is part of the critical theory, some people, you know, would attack him for being so close to structural functionalists. By the way, Parsons had it only static. See, the bourgeoisie was very optimistic up to the First World War. Then the Titanic happened. The Titanic was a symbol. Titans are the enemies of gods. The Titans make rebellion of God. So when the bourgeoisie called that ship Titan, that means we are not afraid of the gods. We build a ship which will be saved. Nobody will be able to sink it, and so on. And so then they floated through to the Atlantic, and then the captain was then by the producer of the ship. He was seduced to go to high speed. So he increased the speed, which he was not supposed to do, and then encounters that iceberg and with full speed run against it and ripped open the whole side. So that was a warning before the First World War, and then came the catastrophe of the First World War and the whole optimism of the bourgeoisie in the basement. Suddenly they read Schopenhauer again and so on, and so it has remained that way. So therefore Parsons only had a structure and the function of the structure, but he had no dynamic, namely movement. But then the students forced him at Harvard to develop also a theory, and he developed a neo-Darwinistic theory, which says there are primitive societies, there are archaic societies, then there are historic and intermediate societies, that would be Saudi Arabia now, and then there are modern societies, and then he didn't know anymore what would come. So he included socialism into modern society, and then said we have another 150 years, and then the whole thing will blow up. And so, but he didn't even know if it would blow up or whatever, but he just didn't know how it would go further. So then he had a dynamic, and in the first one, In the primitive, there was particularly the family. In the archaic, you had family and religion. And in the archaic, already kingship came up. Historical intermediate, you have kingship then, and then you get in modern, where the economic system moves into the foreground. So the family system, and then the religious system, and then the economic, the kingship, aristocracy, and then you have the socialist society and the bourgeois society. Their main subsystem is the economy, and that he didn't know where we will go. So, but he knew where we were coming from. So he refined Darwinism and applied it then to the human history. Okay, so that is the opponent of the Frankfurt School, right? So we want to see the environment in which the Frankfurt School is situated. And fascism is one, and Parsons is another one. And it's interesting, as far as religion is concerned, Luhmann does not have an ultimate reality anymore above the system. So already with Parsons, you can pray to the ultimate reality, to Allah, but Allah does not work back into the system. If Allah would interfere with the system, you could not have a system, because you would never know what Allah will do. So therefore, it is a one-sided relationship. So religious people relate themselves through religion to the ultimate reality, and they are then different. Maybe they will do their duties now as father and mother and teacher and so on better, because they are relating them to the ultimate reality. But the ultimate reality is not active, like Yahweh works and guides Moses and Joshua and what they have to do, and so on. And so does Allah in terms of Muhammad and his followers and so on. Allah is at work in their life. If you have the God working in society, you could not have a scientific system of the society, because you would never know what will happen next when the God will, miraculous, strike into it, lets the sun stand still, like under Joshua and so on, so the battle can last a little bit longer and so on. You could not have a natural science, nor could you have a social science.
Okay, I have a question. If critical thinking is the first thing in enlightenment, could we say that the critical theory or this critical method of Frankfurt School is just is a production of the enlightenment?
Yeah, right, definitely. So it is one stage in enlightenment, but what you have pointed out here, that was your discovery. So they are enlighteners who at the same time become self-critical, asking that question: how is it possible that after these centuries of bourgeois enlightenment and Marxist enlightenment and Freudian enlightenment, this thing there can happen? Now you've got it all together, right? And not only that this guy is dead, but that this goes on, that they have the Trumps trumping around the place. That is the issue. How could that happen, right? So you could also ask, how could that happen with the religion before, How could these people be Catholics and Protestants and do such a thing, like killing 27 million people there, or killing the 6 million Jews, or whatever else they did, all the things, right? And did not even repent it. That means they were proud that they killed that. They were sorry before they died that they didn't kill more. See, where's the conscience? There is none. The conscience is a product of Socrates and Jesus. There was no conscience before, and it now disappears again.
Well, in the best scenario, they would say it was necessary, and there are always reasons they give, and so to scare Russians in the case of
Yeah, of course. Of course, yes, of course, all crimes have a reason for it. Yeah, right. Criminal reasons for criminal acts.
Even Bush says about the war of Iraq, there was dangers for the states, and they have. So they always give reasons.
Yeah, of course, yeah. They're maybe as criminal as the actions are, right? Or they can have maybe good reasons sometimes, and the bad means, which they think that. Trump wants to have waterboarding, and he wants to do it worse than waterboarding, and I think they should put him into his bathtub and show him what waterboarding is like, so that he knows there's not possibly anything worse than that, short of death. So they have the whole thing, the Holy Inquisition did waterboarding. They invented it. Why? The purpose was a holy one, to keep Europe one faith. And therefore they killed all these thousands of people who were heretics or Jews or whatever. And then Hitler got it, and he used it for a good purpose, to make Germany great again. Yes, and have the world power and such. And it didn't help neither, you see. So, and then of course we did it, under Bush. And then Obama cancelled it, but I don't know if it's really cancelled or not. In any case, under Obama you get it back again. Okay, so this is your paper, and I want to give it to you. It's very good, and I want to give you all your papers back. Let me just put that. Can we put that over there? By the way, I have a book here, American Fascism, right? So that it's not only my fantasy or whatever. The Christian Right and the War on America, from Chris Hedges, and he has written other books. So there is a whole library he produced. And there are about 20 points what fascism consists of, and I can just read some things there. So that is as good as you can get it, so that you know where you are in case you have some illusions where you are. The first feature of fascism is the cult of tradition, make America great again. See, the again is important. That means we were great once, and then we fell down, and we have to go back. So that is part of the fascism, the authoritarian personality. And then another one is here, traditionalism implies the rejection of modernism. So they are modern people who are at the same time anti-modern. And the reason is that the Enlightenment has split. That means the bourgeoisie used the Enlightenment in order to rule the West, the 250 million workers here. So that is the split which is now, of course, working itself out. That means the administration of justice, the injustice against the black man, and so on. That means the people who make the laws are not the people who are put into prison. So that means that is why we have more prisoners than anybody else. The bourgeoisie makes the laws, and the 250 million cannot follow them because they don't have the means. You cannot be moral if you have nothing to eat, or not enough to eat, or no job, or whatever. So, and then the irrationalism also depends on the cult for action's sake. Do something, you don't do anything, Trump, every minute. This Congress is not doing, it's a do nothing, and so on. Hitler said the same thing. This parliament is not doing anything, and so on. That means doing without thinking. That is, and that is an American trait, by the way. Long before we had that fascist thing here, there was this already. Just action, action, action. And then when you're just thinking, just writing books, and so that doesn't help, And so, in spite of the fact that Marx was sitting in the museum for 25 years and did do nothing else than study factory reports and parliamentary reports and so on. You have to think if you want to act, and so on. The American ways very often do something, and then they do and do and do, and they do the same thing. It doesn't lead anywhere. So because it is not thought through, thoughtless type of action. Even the student movements in the 60s had that. So, and I always fought against this. Okay, so the irrationalism and so on. So you can I let that book go around about diversity and so on. So the fascists have an answer to all of this. Take it seriously. Will be one group which will be under attack if the fascists come in, right? There are many other groups.
What of your...
14. So there are 14 Newspeak and so on. So I let that go around, right? So Hedges is the name. If you want to go a little bit deeper into it, you can.
What book that you wrote that combine the base of your understanding of your experience, academic experience in philosophy and so on, critical theory and so on. What did you write something that combined that you have a theory that you are repeating?
I have it in all of them.
All the time.
It's in all of them, yeah.
So you do have that written somewhere?
It's written all over. So all my books are about the critical theory, right? They're all about it. But it's a broad field. So, but I want to give you your papers back now. otherwise you get impatient. Okay, you have yours already? Did I give you?
No.
Where did it go? Okay, so we have here, who is it? Khalud Al-Shamaki. Who has it? Where is he? He jumped into the fire? Okay. Sarah Al-Duabisi. Okay, very good. So, Faleh Al-Habi.
I think he's okay.
He went up there, you can give it to him. And then John Chu is here. Very good paper.
I forgot to write my name.
This is mine. Yeah.
This is yours? Okay, and then we have here Nawal Al-Shamaki. That's you, okay. Very good. And so, yeah, here, that is, please look at this, right? You have the whole structure here of the critical theory on this. We talked about today about these 5 human potentials there. But everything what we said about religion, it's there too. And now we want to...
Can I see that?
You want to look at it once more?
Yeah, I have a copy. Okay, the same thing. Okay.
Yeah. You have it then?
Yeah.
Okay. No, it's the same thing, yeah. Okay, what time is it now? Do you want to make a short break?
Yeah, I could do that.
Let's make a little break.
Did you meet the 2 authors of the Jaime and Adorno?
Yes, right, I did, yeah. And I met Habermas too. So, yes, I'm very glad that I came together with them. So just look your papers through. If you want me to explain something, I'm glad to do that.
Did you study something with them already?
He is still, here's yours. Okay, let me just, do you want to rest a little bit more? If you want to, we can do that. Yeah, we can put that. You can put the light on if you want to. Cigarettes there.
I prefer a little bit dark.
Yeah. So we can, if you want to, we can go through them a little bit more if you have questions. Okay, I just took the first one. You can put that over there too. Okay, there was one of you who wrote about the family. Who was that? One of you wrote in your paper. Half of your paper was about the family.
Story about the story.
Your story?
No, in general, about a family study. Does somebody study education or so, or one of you wrote about the family? It's you, right? Okay. Because as if you had some kind of a course on the family, did you?
No.
No? Well, I wish I knew now which one. But let me just, whoever it was, it's valid for all of you. You had, you said something about the family and the different family problems, divorce and so on, and children's education. And two of you have an education course, right?
Yeah.
Who is it? Who? Okay. Yeah. So one of you may have written that, where you have some pages on the family, the modern family and the family problems. Did you do something? I can look at it, but it doesn't matter who. But let me just explain something. The study which you did was a positivistic study. So remember we talked about the notion. The notion is the universal, the particular, and the singular. So when you study a problem, let's see the family, you can start with the universal and go to the particular and the singular. Or you can start with the singular problems, their divorce or whatever, and then go to the particular and to the universal. The way how we do it here in these universities, these are all positivistic universities, we start with the particulars, innumerable problems, education problems, health problems, and so on. You did this, right? Did you do that in your paper? And so that is one way to do it, how we do it. But there is another way which has somewhat been repressed, and that is that you start with the universal. That means you start with the notion of the family, and then you see how the family differentiates itself into marriage, into family property, education of children, transition of children into civil society. They are now educated, can get a job, and have their own families, and so on. So now that would be, to start with the notion of the family instead of with some facts or data about the family. You can go from the particular and the singular through abstraction, then you come also to some kind of a concept of the family, but it's usually not adequate. So there were thinkers before the positivists who would always start with the notion of the family or the notion of the state, and not with the problems immediately there. But here, when you write a paper or so, you are not allowed to start a priori. You are only allowed to start posteriori, otherwise they will cross out your work. So you did the right thing as you did it. I just want to mention that there is another possibility, right? So, and then when you come from the notion of the family, you can see also where the problems are. For instance, if you have a divorce, that affects also the family property very often. You lose your house or whatever, and that affects also the education of the children who do not have a father anymore, do not have a mother anymore, who had this conflict all the time. They become neurotic. You have to have re-education. You have to go to the psychiatrist who gives them a pill for attention deficit, or you have to go to a psychoanalyst or to a counselor and in order to help you. So re-education, because the children have not been educated adequately. So when you start from the notion, you can locate where the problems are, and the problems are all interconnected. Otherwise, when you start from the isolated facts, you may not see how that all hangs together. So what you have then is a boy in the class, who cannot listen really, or who comes too late, or runs out, and so on. And you think, why does he behave that way? Well, he behaved that way because he was in a dysfunctional, that is called dysfunctional family, or he was in a failed family, and or when you have a social worker who has been trained the same way like you have been, he goes into a family and he says, that's the family Miller, and then he sees how they struggle with each other, shout at each other, and so on. He says, this is not a family. That means this social worker still has the notion, the idea of a family, because he knows that something is wrong there. That's not how it ought to be. So in spite of the fact that he is a positivist, or she, he still has some notion, some idea, some archetype as they were present in the religions, but also secular people still have that. So I just want to show you that there is a deductive way and an inductive way. So you do it inductively, you do it from an a priori thing, and that's perfectly all right, perfectly valid. I just want to show you that there is another way to look at the whole thing, where you start from this notion and then you come down and you see there is no family wage in this country, there is no minimum wage, and so on. That influences the family property. They cannot pay for the toilet paper. We have to collect toilet paper every Sunday here in my church because there are thousands of people in Kalamazoo who cannot afford their toilet paper. So then you go there to the notion of civil society, not just coming from the problems. Civil society, need system, administration of justice, police and professional organizations. So when you start with the principle, marriage in the family, or need system in civil society, you can think that whole thing through. You are not only collecting information and putting it all together, but you bring thought in it. The thought is civil society. The thought is family. And then with this thought, you can penetrate the facts and the data which you get. So both ways should maybe be combined. So then we see that the capitalistic system does not fulfill those needs, toilet paper and many, many other needs. Then people get angry, and that plays over into the political system, and they vote for a fascist. You see that all these things are connected, and that there are, of course, factories who can produce new toilet paper, but the price is too high. So these families don't have enough family income and family property in order to afford toilet paper or soap or food or housing or whatever, right? So then you get a connected picture. That is what the critical theory, the whole tradition from Rousseau, Voltaire, Kant, and so on, up to the Frankfurt School, because they are not hanging in the air. They are, connected. And the American way is very often that this connection is not seen. I have a colleague who wrote a dissertation about Erich Fromm, but he did not know that Erich Fromm was a member of the Frankfurt School. I wonder what in God's name he understood. Nothing. Yeah, so that is, But I don't want to play it down because I got this horse up there. That's a Bronco horse. I just got that for 50 years service here at the university. And I'll tell you something about this later on.
So there is inductive, you said?
Yeah, one is deductive and the other one is inductive, right? So
deductive to start from down.
Deductive starts from the universal and goes from the particular to the singular. Inductive starts with the singular and the particular and goes to the universal. Okay, so yes. 51, yeah. But altogether I have taught 61 years, so I have a long time teaching already. Okay, is there any other thing which we can say about your papers? Do you have anything else which you would like to?
Why they wouldn't? They would reject the research.
Can I just get this?
If it is deductive.
Well, it is an epistemological thing, right? Now, let me put it that way. Plato, right? So that's the beginning of thinking, right, in the West. So Plato, of course, started from the ideas. So he had a world of ideas which were not empirical. They were pre-empirical. Then he went to the real tree. Do we have a discussion first? Let's see. How about the cookies? Do you want to have the cookies and the water? Anything else about your paper, what I can say? So I made some remarks. You all got a wonderful grade. And so is there anything before we make the next step? Okay, if not, then we go to the next thing. That was your question now, right? So why is it, as we just had it, why don't we start, with the notion or the idea or the nature of the family and then go down to these details so that we can see it all connected? Why do we start with these disconnected facts and data about divorce rate or abortion rate or the, whatever, the educational misery and so on. The reason is that the West became materialistic. So to be materialistic means to study go from below above there. But the Western thought, and that means also the Islamic thought, because Islamic philosophy was Aristotelian. So Plato started with the idea of God, or with the idea of the family, or the idea of the state. Then he went to Syracuse, for instance, in Sicily, and tried to transform the tyrant, the despotism there, and lift it up to the idea of what a good state would be like. And so now, for Plato, that was a realm of ideas. In Christianity, these ideas were put into the mind of God. So these were the thoughts of God. And then when you want to do something in society, you say, what does God think about the family? How should the family be if it would please God, or the state, or civil society, or how history would go? And then you see it's the real opposite of what God thinks and so on. So with Aristotle, and the Arabic culture was Aristotelian, and so the West become that. There, the idea was put into reality. That means the idea is not above the tree, the idea is in the tree, and it is the entelechia in the tree. It steers the growth of the tree. It steers the assimilation process of the tree down in the ground, the water, the chemicals, and the sunlight, and so on. And then also the reproduction of the tree, namely the acorns, the seeds, and so on, which spread, and so on. So the entelechia was the soul of the tree, and it formed and shaped the growth and the development of the tree. And then comes modernity, right? And modernity is nominalistic. That means Plato's idea is only in my head. Aristotle's idea is not in the tree, it's only in my head. It's only a name. It's called nominalism. Nomen means Latin, the name. So, and this name is only in my head, and then I put these names as labels on things, but the things themselves cannot be known by us. Only the appearances of the things can be known. And therefore the Enlightenment is nominalistic to a large extent. So here we have one of the roots of the Enlightenment thinking. So this is also called de-Hellenization. The Enlightenment is de-Hellenized. It doesn't follow Aristotle anymore. It doesn't follow Plato anymore. But they don't know the nature of the family anymore. That's the reason why they then begin with the facts and the data. Because it is an epistemological problem. What can we know? We cannot know what we cannot see. What I see is that these two are divorced. What I see is these children are neurotic. What I see is their income is too low, and so on. These are all empirical things. But the nature of the family cannot be seen.
That would be philosophical, not empirical. That would be...
Transempirical, yeah. The notion is transempirical, but modern people start empirical, a posteriori. And the a priori is hidden from us. The thing is that's also Kant, that's also Rousseau, and so on. So you have to be, when the Pope comes now and has social ethics, which is Aristotelian, nobody understands the word. They use that word and they say the Pope is so friendly and kisses the feet of people and so on and so on. That's all nice, but they don't understand a word of what he says because they are nominalists and positivists and so on. Even when they are good-hearted, even if they would like to understand it, they don't understand it. Right? So that is between the religious and the secular, which you have to take into consideration, that there are modern people who honestly say, I don't know what you say when you talk about the Holy Quran or what the Imam is talking. They do not understand a word. They would like to, but they don't. So it's just a riddle to them.
This is instrumental.
But there are also religious people, see, who do not understand a word of what the Enlighteners say. So, and that is why both of them are anti-integration people. They both put the integration of both sides because they cannot understand the other side. And it's not just evilness or whatever, it's just an epistemological thing. They think the religious people overstep what human reason can really say. and therefore they don't understand miracles and angels and so on because they cannot see them anywhere. It's not part of their experience. And so, therefore, we have to have a discourse between two sides in which each side takes the other one serious in all their theories and their presuppositions. Was a position of faith, religious faith on one side, and the other one who is just emphasized reason, but then they are split in themselves because the enlighteners like Kant, for instance, would say our understanding, that means that's one function of our mind, is just limited. We cannot go and say something about freedom, we cannot say anything about immortality, we cannot say anything about God. Now we may need that in order to live more life, therefore they said we have to postulate it. Or they say God is a hypothesis. We have to have this God hypothesis because otherwise we cannot live a real life. But or they would say, if you think that you know the reality of the idea of God, you are a hypocrite. In reality, you don't know anything. That is the question between, in the West, it is between Anselm of Canterbury, and there was a monk, Gaudio, and Kant followed this Gaudio guy, who said we cannot know if this idea of God which we have, if it is real or not. And so there's a medieval monk, around 1,000 who said that already, and Kant followed that monk, and Hegel followed Anselm of Canterbury. And even perfected it. That means he showed the whole development from being to God's idea, and that God's idea from the very beginning and with necessity contains in itself being. He went much further than Anselm of Canterbury did. He did it much better than he did. But on the other side, you have those who are the majority in the modern world. That means, okay, the idea of God is a hypothesis. It's good to have this hypothesis. It's a postulate. You can postulate it. It makes you feel good and maybe makes you a better person too. But it's just a postulate. Nothing is proven whatsoever. And that means that faith people are then without the support of reason or metaphysics, and that on the other side, modern people have taken away when people said, I believe so that I can know, they don't think that faith is the basis of knowledge. So you see how deep that antagonism goes between religious and secular people. Are secular people aware of this? No. Most Americans you see on the street, they have no clue who they are. And also a lot of religious people have no clue who they are. So that makes it difficult again to have a discourse, because both sides may say, what the hell, I don't know what you are talking about. And they really mean it. So it's not that they just play stupid.
The two sides is the religious world and the
right.
enlightenment.
Right. These two here. Okay. So now let me just see to the where we are today, that I don't forget things here. I wrote it down nicely. So we are finished with the papers, and now we are looking forward to, where are we? We are in 10 discourse. How many did we have? We missed some. 11, and we have 12. Where are we? Social technology, yeah. Okay, that is the 12th discourse. Social technology was human. That would be called social technology, right? So, is it social technology, or is it a more humanistic type of a thing? Test number 2 will be from April 6th to the 13th. So, and I have to have it punctual because I go to Europe. So we have to, and we do it the same way again. I will have some questions there, and then you can continue your depth study. So whatever you had in the depth study, you just take the next chapter. And as far as the background reading is concerned, we have those two. Where are they? Are they over there? I think they should be there. Can you just look there if there's something? Okay. Okay, let's see what we have there. Before we do that, Yeah, no, that's not. If you want to, you can take it as a depth study. Yeah, that was one of them, and then we had another one. Okay, so yeah, let's take this one, the back study, the future of religion. Can we get that? Can you bring it over here? So that you can take. It's in the library. You can get it from the library. You can share it with each other, and particularly take the first chapter or the 32nd and the 33rd chapter. So the last two chapters and the first chapter. One of these chapters is enough. Okay, and then you can just sum it up if you want to. So you can take that, or you can take the questions like we had it this time. Or if you don't want to have this book, you can take another one by me from the library or from the bookstore. Okay, so but that would be the assignment for the test. You don't get the test today yet, so I give it to you the next time, probably April 6th. Okay, and then I need it in 1 week because I have to give you a grade before I leave for Europe. So I go to Dubrovnik and to Rome, and so I have to give you the grades before I leave. So therefore, we have to have it on the 13th. I don't think that we want to take extra credit. You were all here, nobody missed, and you have your test, so we don't need that. So all what we do at the end is to do this one test. That's the conclusion of it. So let me just do one more thing, the contemporary issue thing. Yeah, I want to do one thing we had last week. We had, and I wanted to talk about this for a minute. Dustin was there too, and Dustin gave a wonderful speech there. And I gave a little speech in which I summed up what the critical theory is all about. And so I just want to take this part and say one word about it, what I said about our critical theory there. Or particularly the critical theory of, maybe, can you take that over here? A minute. Let's put it on the paper, yeah, right. Okay. So we came together last Wednesday, so it was just a week ago, and the president was there, and he gave me this Bronco horse, and I almost sang the Bronco song, but I didn't know it anymore. I didn't know what it was, what it sounded like. So, and my family was there, so we had a wonderful family celebration, and so we celebrated these 50 years. And so I don't want to go into, I thanked different people who worked with me the 50 years, and my PhD candidates were there too, 3 of them. I had innumerable ones. They are spread all over the universe nowadays, and so the provosts were there. And but then what I said in the end there about what we try to do there, what we did in these 50 years. I mean, people, they want to know a little bit about this. And so what we said was, I said that people ask, what this critical theory is all about, the critical theory of religion and so on. And so I tried to sum it up. And I talked something about before about the General Patton. I don't know if you have ever heard about General Patton. There's a movie about him. 71 years ago, I surrendered to him after weeks and weeks of fighting and battles. I was an officer in the German anti-tank division, and so when he crossed the Rhine River, we tried to stop him there, and it was very bitter fights with high numbers of casualties, and I didn't have any soldiers anymore when I surrendered. So and I talked about some of his things. He was a believer in the migration of the soul from Hinduism. He thought he was an incarnation of Hannibal. He thought he was an incarnation of Caesar and of Napoleon. And when he said something, he said, I was there. And so I mentioned Joshua, who was something like a Hebrew General Patton. And so if you would have talked with Patton about it, he would say, I was there. I beat the hell out of the Canaanites and so on. So he was more of a Nazi than my officers were, than my generals were in the German army. He wanted to march after 1945. He wanted to march with the SS back to Stalingrad. he hated the communists as much as the Nazis did. So, but the Congress forbid it to him, and so after all these incarnations, he didn't have to do much because he fought in Sicily and he fought in the Normandy, but he wanted to be the supreme commander of all the forces, anti-Nazi forces, and they used him as a some kind of a whatever you want to call it. They had tanks and airplanes in southern England, which were supposed to look like the real army. So the Germans flew over it and took pictures and didn't see that it was all out of paper. It was not real. And the Americans said that Patton, General Patton, would be the commander of this unit. And the Germans, since he was so fascist as they were, they had high respect for Patton. And they said, Patton will come there where the channel is smallest. That's where they will attack. And look at all the tanks are there, the airplanes and so. That's where he comes. And in the meantime, they planned the thing in the Normandy, far away from that small. They went to a very wide thing where they need quite time to cross it. And so the Germans expected them up there, and they landed down there in the Normandy or Ottawa Beach and so on. And it was a big surprise. And then Hitler kept the forces up where they were not, and they were missing where they were. They were not there where they were supposed to be. And so, but Patton played a very ridiculous type of a role, and so his dream of his person that he would be another Hannibal or Napoleon or was somehow the dream became a nightmare for him. So he also beat up a soldier once because he was a coward. He thought he was a coward. He had a nervous breakdown, and then he had to apologize before the whole army in Wiesbaden, and had to tell him that he was sorry that he beat the soldier up. And so he was a wild man. But what I said here in his memory there was, I fought against him in the city of Alzenau. It was the city of Alzenau. It's still there. And so I took Alzenau when he had taken it already. And so his troops had to flee and had to give up the city. And when I looked in the mayor's basement, there was a hospital. He left a hospital behind, and in this, do we all hear it? In the hospital, and there were American soldiers and German soldiers there, and they had the same treatment. They were treated the same way. The general followed the Geneva Convention to every detail, and they said that is the greatest thing you can say about any general. So. But now the point what we want to do here in order to sum up our own thing here too. So in these 50 years, or really 60 years, we developed this critical theory of religion or of society. And then we traced the history of religion from the traditional union of the sacred and the profane through their modern disunion to their possible future postmodern reunion. We concentrated on the antagonism between the religious and the secular, as I just said, and the contradiction it produces in the religious communities as well as in the modern Enlightenment movements, which means, of course, that if we want to overcome these splits between ISIS and others and so on, we have to do something about the fundamental antagonism between the religious and the secular all overall. Otherwise, the split among the enlightened people and among the religious people cannot be healed, whatever. And certainly not by bombing or killing or whatever, anything will be solved. So we aimed at a future reconciliation of a new religion and a new enlightenment. We wanted to rescue both religion and the enlightenment. Modern secular people know that there is something missing. Religious people have to find new translators for their message. We were convinced that there could be no peace among nations without peace among the religions, that there could be no peace among the religions without discourse among them, that there could be no discourse among them without mutual research and knowledge about their interpretations of reality and orientations of action. Shortly, the purpose of our critical theory was ecumenical, universal, and so on, in the broadest sense of the word. I would like to conclude my short remarks about the long story with a statement of the great Hindu Mahatma Gandhi, a martyr of freedom. You know, he was assassinated by another Hindu because he was too friendly with the Muslim. the brothers in the area. And so he says here, Mahatma Gandhi says, 7 sins, the 7 blunders of the world that lead to violence. Wealth without work, that's capitalism. Pleasure without conscience. Knowledge without character. Commerce without morality. Science without humanity. Worship without sacrifice. Politics without principle. And then I turned it all into the positive, what he had said in the negative. The 7 virtues and duties of the world that lead to peace, wealth only on the basis of work, pleasure with conscience, knowledge with character, commerce with morality, science with humanity, worship with sacrifice, politics with principle. So that was our celebration of 50 years of our work here and in Japan and in Israel and in the Near East and in Dubrovnik and in Russia and all over the place.